It's July, Sarah.
It's July, Jen.
But this episode we recorded in June.
We did, in the past.
In the past.
Who knows? Who knows what it's like out there today?
Let's not talk about it. We're here for hopeful romance, good things only.
It's 6 days before my book comes out.
I know.
So I'm vibrating at a fever pitch.
You know, we recorded this a month in advance, but we do know that is fact.
That is true. There's no question I'm not vibrating. Unless I might be dead, but I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them. Welcome everyone to Fated Mates.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader, editor, and audiobook listener, which is important because this week...
Oh, wait. I just got a Book of the Month Club notification. So everybody, if you're a Book of the Month Club subscriber, today's your day to order Storms in your box. But
I know. It's so exciting, Sarah.
Very exciting.
You're a superstar.
It's happening. It's happening.
It's happening.
But Julia Whelan is here.
Yes.
And I'm so excited about this because we've played around with Julia Whelan a few times.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that as part of this conversation. But everyone knows Julia Whelan is like the superstar of superstars of audiobooks.
Yes.
You are all... I mean, she's an absolute rock star.
Yeah.
You've heard her as the narrator for Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, for Emily Henry's books, for
Gone Girl,
Schwab's books.
Yeah.
And next
for
week,
your book.
Actually, today, you're going to get a sneak peek of her narrating the first chapter of my upcoming novel, These Summer Storms.
It's so exciting. So basically the way it's going to work in a second, we're going to kind of roll the tape with Julia. And then we had a great conversation. You know, it's really interesting. We don't recommend a lot of books. We just really are talking about like the audio landscape and how it's changed. And she's just really fascinating person. So even if you are not yourself an audiobook listener, I think you will actually find the conversation we had super interesting. It's fascinating.
Yeah, because audio has become so ubiquitous
big
in romance.
Yeah, and we talked about like sort of the romance landscape and recording and how books are changing because of the popularity of audio. Like we really cover a lot of ground, and she is, you know, an expert. She talks to us about her app, Audiobrary, which does really cool things with getting audiobook narrators paid on a royalty kind of schedule. So if you are an author who's thought like, hey, maybe I want to like launch into audio, that might be really interesting for you to listen to. If you're a listener, it might be a way that you're like, hey, if the book I'm interested in is on Audiobrary, then maybe that's a place I can like sort of spend my dollars and help these narrators out. So there's a lot of really cool things happening.
And also, if you are still out there and feel like you want to head over to St. Louis to hang out with us next week, no, in 6 days, on release day of These Summer Storms, Jen and I and Kate Claiborne, our favorite, and couple hundred Firebirds are all getting together. It's going to be a great time in St. Louis. Hopefully there's still tickets. If there aren't, there are probably still tickets to some of the other tour dates that I'm doing over the course of the next couple of weeks. Please come out and visit me. I will have Fated Mates stickers. I'll have Fated Mates pins. I'll have Jen with me in a couple of places. Who knows what you'll find?
Exactly. It's really exciting.
There will be cool people. It will be very fun. Please come and hang out with me because I've never done this before and I'm scared. So join me.
It's going to be amazing. My job really now is to just talk Sarah down. So
Support.
That's it. I understand. I have a job and I'm
Hype
really
woman.
good at it. So, all right. So everybody, without further ado, Julia Whelan.
Welcome, Julia Whelan, to Fated Mates.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. It's like a long-time listener, first-time caller. You know what I mean?
But we've had an interesting path, Fated Mates and Julia Whelan, because we are extra content, and we're going to get to the whole audiobrary of it all. But we're very excited because you came to us with a very cool project at one point where we got to do a Trailblazer interview with one of your characters, which was so fun.
It was really fun.
I felt like David Letterman on like a movie. In a movie.
Yeah, I think that's what was hilarious about it is I had this idea on like one of my walks or something where all of my either best or worst ideas come from. And I was just like, before I can second guess this, I'm going to just send Sarah a message and say, hey, I have this absolutely bonkers idea. Any chance you and Jen would want to do it? Because I love the Trailblazer episodes so much. And, again, if we're going to get into this later, but the whole conceit of Casanova LLC, which was my third book, is that it was written by this fictional, iconic, legendary romance author. And so I was like, wouldn't it be great if June French could have
a Trailblazer
a Trailblazer episode?
And she was so great, too. She smoked through the whole thing.
That's right.
We haven't had a smoker on Trailblazers besides June French. She was terrific.
Part of the trivia. See, that can be part of the Fated Mates lore moving forward. It's like, it's only for
the
the
live. We should.
The deep fans only know the one person who smoked. Yeah.
That would be really fun for Fated Mates Live to do like
a trivia show on us.
For trivia.
We would fail our own trivia show.
We
That's the part. I'm like, I don't know. Did I say that? What
we
was I
need the
thinking?
listeners to build the questions.
It's funny because right around when that happened, I was sitting around. So everyone knows I have a day job where I'm a middle school teacher, and we're sitting around at lunch one day. And kind of sometimes people, like, if you're not a romance reader, I don't really talk. I'm not like proselytizing out there, everybody. And so, but I sort of mentioned that, like, someone was talking about like an audiobook they really liked, and it was like one you'd done. And I was like, oh yeah, we did this really cool thing. And like, as I was sort of trying to explain it, they were just like, wait, what do you do again? And I was like, well, up on the second floor, I teach children about literature. But
down
also
in the basement.
Down in the basement.
Yeah, exactly. In the red room.
And you know what? Honestly, it was great. I felt really famous. And I'm for sure going to be sending several of my coworkers who are not romance readers this episode when it airs. I'll be like, see, look, I know her.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, this is honestly, you guys were so important to to thank you for listening to that process, because I had been, and I'm sure we'll get into like my origin story of how I found myself narrating romance, but I had taken a break from narrating romance for about 5 years when or maybe not that long, maybe a few years, but when I decided it was time to write Thank You for Listening, which is about romance audiobooks. And I was like, I need to, no pun intended, bone up on this subject that I have been very much out of the loop on. And I just started listening to Fated Mates. And I was like, they're going to tell me everything I need to know about what's going on in romance right now. And from your recommendations, I just created like a reading list for myself. And
oh my gosh,
so you both are very much all over both of those books. Thank You and Casanova.
Well, we're very flattered.
Yeah, and that's often actually for sort of people who are kind of curious about romance, but maybe not sure about, like, I often recommend Thank You for Listening because it's a great romance, but it's also, I would say, like, rated G.
Yeah, it's gateway, yes. It's a fade to black rom-com.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like all of the delicious, awesome parts of a great romance, but without somebody worrying that they're going to be driving down the Kennedy and hearing about, balls or whatever. Sorry, I'll just say it.
Couldn't be me. Okay, so for those of you who live under a rock, Julia Whelan is...
I don't think that's fair, but okay.
In the book world, you would living under a rock.
If you listen to Fated Mates, you should know Julia Whelan is, the gold standard of narrators. For, I feel like, all books.
Yeah, right. All books, not just romance.
But your path to, I want to talk about your path into narration and then, of course, in romance, because you were in romance before, you were Sophie Eastlake before you were Julia Whelan, correct? In audiobooks.
I think they happened pretty simultaneously. Okay. Well, actually, that's a good question. I would have to, I'll come back to you on that.
It's close.
I have to do math, so give me a half an hour and then I'll come back.
But let's start kind of at the beginning. So you are an actress first. And
yes.
And so can you take us through the sort of how Julia came to be the superstar audio narrator who we are all desperate. We all put on our vision board to narrate our books.
Some of us more than others, Sarah.
I mean,
Okay, so so I was a child actor. I had been working since I was 9 years old. I kind of hit the peak of my career and fame and working life when I was in high school. I then decided to take a break from Hollywood and go to college where I really put aside the acting and I focused on creative writing. And I graduated with an English and history and creative writing degree. And one of my best friends there, her mother happened to be an audiobook producer and director. And so she came to me at my literal graduation and said, you have a unique set of skills that I think might be suited to this job. And I had never heard of audiobooks. I'd never listened to one. And, I'm like, books on tape, like those things.
Right.
And this was 2008. And I fully intended to go back to Hollywood and get my old job back, just get right on another television show and just, and super easy. And I didn't realize that no one cared that I had left or that I was back. The entire landscape had changed in Hollywood. Like movie stars were doing TV now, HBO was really cranking. Netflix was just kind of starting, and it was just a completely different business than the one I had left. And so after about a year of knocking on doors, I called Laura and I was like, okay, so wait, what is this job and how do I do it and how do I get into it? And I put together a demo reel for her. She sent me, it passed muster with her company. She sent me a couple of YA novels because at the time YA was just beginning to boom.
Huge.
And it was the golden age of YA, and they needed younger voices. And so just because of that accident of timing, I slipped into the industry. And I did, we can actually look this up because I don't remember the year at this point. I don't trust myself to remember years. But my very first romance was Dragonbound by Thea Harrison.
Which
I know you guys have talked about on the pod.
Just re-listened to last week.
Oh God. Okay, so here's the thing. No, but here's the thing. There's a handful of books I wish I could record, and because Thea and I are very, very close now, and I love these books so much. And A, I just wish I'd done them under my real name. But B, I wish I could go back and do it again, because that audiobook was actually nominated for an Audie, but I think that's actually the perfect representation of how far the industry has come since then, and how the difference in none of us knew what we were doing. We didn't know what we were doing.
Well, for what it's worth, I found it to be still a banger. So
that's the book is so good. But it's I had never done anything. I remember actually being in the studio, and I was self-recording, but I was borrowing a room from an engineer, and I was having a tech problem, and he came into the room to help me with it. And up on the screen, just in mortification, up on the screen was my Merriam-Webster lookup for how to say clitoris, because as I was recording this book, I was like, I just want to make sure I'm not
Could
wrong.
you imagine you got that one wrong?
People will, exactly. And so he's looking and he's like, what are you recording? And I'm like, don't ask. I mean, that I think shows just how no one knew what we were doing at all.
I am really curious maybe to hear you say more about that, because I don't know why, but when I have kind of hit older audiobooks, right? It does feel like there's something different about them, and I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? I just can't figure it out. I don't think I have the language or the, sort of industry knowledge, but they recorded books from kind of before 2010 just feel different.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I have the answer to it. Certainly not from the business perspective. I can just say that from the performance perspective, I think something that has happened in audiobooks over the last 15 years, let's say, is the difference from just reading the book to performing the book. And this was a job you could only learn at that time, I believe, by doing it. And the greatest gift that I had early in my career was that we were still going into studios then. Like now everyone has a home studio, and it's kind of expected that if you want to get started in this industry, you have to have a home studio. And the thing that takes away from the process is like just being around other people doing it, and water cooler talk, and figuring out how to interpret a text and perform in a way that feels native to the medium, which is already a kind of difficult, like contrived, you have to get your ears around it to, feel, there's always that orientation process when you're listening to a book of like, okay, what are these voices? And so it's already a kind of, it's something that people have to acclimate to. And just finding that balance and figuring out what audiobook performance even sounds like what is that, was a process that I really only came to by working with other people. And we were all directing each other, and veteran narrators were directing me. And so we just learned from each other. And I kind of lament that that's not the path anymore.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by M.A. Wardell, author of Stirring Spurs.
I'm so into this. Okay, ready? In the heart of Oklahoma's sprawling Rainbow Ranch, Boone Adams thrives as the vibrant soul in the kitchen, tirelessly whipping up meals that warm body and spirit. So I'm already in. But if I weren't already in, this next bit is really going to lock it down for me. He is the younger twin to brooding Bo, and Boone kind of embraces a role as like a real caretaker. So he's in the kitchen. He cares a ton about his family. He is like the sunny, bright force in the ranch after, because Bo is obviously the opposite. And he's just sort of longing for someone to care about him and somebody to care for him. Well, everything changes when Wiley Anderson arrives. Wiley is a rugged cowboy who is battling some demons, so check that for Sarah as well. Drawn to the ranch to earn some quick cash in the local rodeo, Wiley has no intention of sticking around. Like, he is a guy who rolls into town, breaks a few hearts, it sounds like, and then heads on out. Well, when they're past Intertown, Boone can't help but nurture him. And Wiley finds that his hardened exterior begins to crack as Boone gets a handle on some of those demons and starts to send them away. So the question is, like, will Boone's like sunny kindness be able to really harness Wiley's tough facade and keep him in this town and convince Wiley that it's worth putting down roots, and ask the question, what if I didn't have to quit you?
So I love M.A. Wardell books, and this is a great, the first novella in a little series, all of which are written by different authors that feature queer romance stories set on the Rainbow Ranch in Oklahoma. So if you would like to get a hop on, or some other rodeo term I just made up.
It's not a thing, is it?
I'm sure it
about
is.
The thing, everyone.
If you would also like to hop on to this awesome Rainbow Ranch series, this first book comes out July 1st, and the rest of them are releasing this month. The books will all be available with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. Thank you to M.A. Wardell for sponsoring this week's episode.
Recently, it has felt so present, the sort of dual narration, that kind of, there are multiple narrators working on a book at one time.
Yeah.
But my first Julia Whelan book was Gone Girl. Because it felt so transformative, and everybody talked about that book because, I feel like I'm allowed to spoil Gone Girl this far down the path. But I remember the moment where the third voice comes. I had not read the book. I read it for the first time in audio. And that moment where I suddenly, there are two voices, and I had never read a book where there were two voices before. And then you get to the third voice sort of appearing in the text, and it just blows your mind, right?
Yeah.
And I think that moment, so I guess my question about it is, in the earlier days when there were multiple narrators in a book, were you all together? This is one of the questions from the Discord too. Like, how much do you do together?
So this is, and you're right, this is very much indicative of the evolution of the industry. So, Gone Girl, for instance, the number of people who tell me that was their first audiobook is incredible. And I think it's because, first of all, that book was such a juggernaut. And it coincided 2012 with the Audible boom. Like, really, the beginning of it was the first time that Audible put so much. They'd just been, I think, acquired by Amazon, or if it had been prior to that, they were just kind of getting rolling with their Amazon money. And they put out this dictum saying, okay, we want to put every book ever written on audio. That was the kind of like grand plan. And that's when we were working 24 hours a day in studios, like sleeping on couches, like swing shifts, getting things recorded. And that's when a lot of people broke into the industry, realized they could make a living doing this. And we all also collectively burned ourselves out. But Gone Girl, because of having the two voices on it, it was so suited to the book. And I think people just, that confluence of like being able to listen to audiobooks on your phone for the first time, right? With, it just was the gateway for a lot of people into audiobooks. Because Kirby, the other narrator on that, Kirby Hayburn, and I were not doing duet, where you have each individual narrator reading their own lines.
Oh, right.
We were doing dual, so alternating chapters. We were not actually in the studio together. Before that time, duet, what we would now call duet, was really more like radio plays, right? So like LA Theater Works does live recordings where, everyone's kind of standing in a studio together reading through the play. The modern idea of duet narration, which I did with Casanova LLC, and I'm doing again with Sierra Simone's new Camelot trilogy coming up, is a lot of people are trying to do duet. We know listeners love it, especially romance listeners, but it's a very expensive process to get everyone together to do it. Even if you're not in studio, even if you're just on Zoom, listening in, doing it live and synchronous, it's still a prohibitively expensive process, because syncing up a narrator's schedules and that time and having an engineer on board can be prohibitive. So a lot of times what happens is you just have narrators like reading their own lines, and then an engineer is cutting them together.
It all together.
Yes. And I mean, look, something is inevitably lost when that's the process, but that is the thing that is more feasible for most authors or small presses to do it that way.
Even dual narration in romance, for example, feels like you all have to be kind of on the same page. And how's that go with a bunch of men?
Oh, what are you talking about, Sarah? I love all of my colleagues. No. So yes. Okay. So actually most narrators are Screen Actors Guild union members as well. Right. And so the union actually kind of came up with some standards around collaboration and particularly dual narration, because as with all group projects, usually the work falls on one person. And you're right that when there's multiple narrators, forget two, even if you've got 4 or 5 people doing different chapters from their perspectives, there's coordination on pronunciation, there's coordination on character voices. Yeah. I like to send character samples back and forth with people so I know what they're doing. Like, we're never going to sound like each other, but if there's certain things I can latch on to, like this person up talks, or, this is a slower, drawlier character. Like, I just want to give a nod toward what other narrators are doing. So it is a logistical. At this point, I'm of the opinion that like I would rather actually not do dual. I would rather do duet, because only if it's live, because then I can like be there working with someone at the same time, than having to coordinate over email with multiple other narrators, all of whom are way too overworked and busy. And there's in romance particularly, there's the kind of gender politics of it all is like the men are these, superstars, and the women who are so immensely talented, so incredibly, incredibly talented, are just always forgotten about in the reviews. It's a very male dominated field, romance.
Well, I want to lay down now. We'll be back in 700 hours.
Well, wait, but let's talk about, since you brought it up, or since we're in this sort of industry piece of it, let's talk about Audiobook, because you're doing something incredibly powerful with your power in this space. And I wonder if you could talk about that with everybody.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I will take any opportunity to talk about Audiobook. So, okay. So a couple of years ago, I kind of hit a termination point in my own patience with this industry, to go back to kind of the arc of the industry, like what I had seen happen and how much it had grown over the course of the 15 years that I had been in it. Double-digit growth year over year for a decade. And narrator rates were not going up the same kind of way. We're not raising our rates double digits every year. And the thing that has always just stuck in my craw about this industry is that narrators don't get royalties. And I could never understand how we were coming out of a, SAG-AFTRA on-camera model of like, I still get residual checks from Lifetime movies I did when I was 12, and publishing that is built on royalties, and yet somehow we're at the center of that Venn diagram and we are benefiting from neither. So I always joke that my villain origin story is that, speaking of Gone Girl, I was paid like $2,500 13 years ago to do Gone Girl. Period.
And that was it.
Right.
That was it.
And also, not for nothing, you are also the narrator of about a dozen of the 15 biggest books of the last 5 years. Right. And
there's that too.
Right.
It's a compounding problem.
You're like,
Right,
her
exactly.
villain origin story. Go ahead and pump up the
I
villain
am.
there,
I am.
Sarah.
Yeah,
I'm
she
making
is.
her. She's
I'm
my
hulking
Venom.
out. I'm hulking out. And it's one of those things where, like, I love this job so much. That's why I'm doing it. It makes no financial sense to be doing this job because the only way you can make more money is to do more volume.
More books,
And as I get older, that's not possible.
No.
Like, everything is breaking down. I can't be in this booth this long. I can't. And it's so offensive to me. Like, I also come from a labor union political family, and so this kind of stuff just riles me up. But it's so offensive to me that everyone continues to make money on this product as this industry continues to explode and as more and more listeners are coming into it, and narrators have a cachet now and a following. We drive listeners to books that they wouldn't normally find, and we know as authors that discoverability is a huge issue. Like, who else can you get that kind of discoverability from other than your narrator? And yet, so I just had this like fight or flight kind of moment where I finally was like, I'm either quitting and writing full time because I just can't, I'm too resentful getting in the booth, or I need to try to change it, because I had asked publishers for years to do the right thing and just kept getting the corporate policy of, we don't do that. So I realized that the only way to really fix this was to become my own audio publisher. And that's what Audiobook is. So we are an audio publisher that licenses audio rights from small presses, from authors, backlist, frontlist, whatever. And we do a profit share model with the authors, and then we give the narrators a royalty. On the way to the forum, the thing that I started to learn when I was like, sure, I could be an audio publisher and just put my stuff everywhere you get audiobooks, but the other kind of looming problem in this industry is that the distribution percentages that retailers take off the top is more than in any other form of digital media. So somebody like Audible, especially for indie authors, could be taking upwards of 75% off of every sale of an audiobook, plus they can price it at whatever they want. And it's such a, again, the way that other people, except for the people who actually made the thing, are making money in this industry is egregious. And so while I was doing the audio publishing part of Audiobook, I also decided to create a direct-to-consumer distribution channel. So people go to our website, they can buy our stuff directly from us, which benefits the authors and the narrators and Audiobook so much more. And then it goes directly into the Audiobook app for them to listen to. We also that said, though, all of our projects are available wide, so you can get them anywhere, Libro, Audible, libraries. But we always have bonus features that are available only on Audiobook, like the June French interview, for instance. Mm-hmm. And we also implemented rentals, which is another thing that I thought was missing from this industry. So people can rent our projects for about a third of the purchase price for a week. And then if you decide you want to buy it, you get a 25% discount. So it basically makes the rental cost a wash.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Chelsea Fagan, author of The High Dive.
Alexandra Onassis, the heroine of this book, hates two things. She hates austerity politics and Daniel Azad. She and Daniel knew each other, and they enrolled together back in college at Columbia University when they were the only two scholarship kids in their group of ultra-wealthy friends. They banded together and they bonded, and they had a pretty heated dynamic, which was ruined forever by one fateful, awful night just before graduation. 10 years later, they are so completely different. Alex is now a social media campaigner for an ultra-progressive political party and candidates. And Daniel is a rising star at a notoriously savage private equity firm. Yeah. So two of their college friends decide that they're going to get married, Jen, in a kind of like millionaire Mediterranean extravaganza. And they decide they're going to host the old crew on a 10-day private yacht trip before the wedding. So Alex goes and realizes she's going to have to face Daniel and also the very sobering reality that like this life that she's built for herself, which she's really proud of, makes her the only middle class person and full outcast in this ultra wealthy crew of old friends. So this feels like a book that is going to really examine this issue of like what happens when you are just absolutely different than all these people who you're with. And not only different, but they live a life that you are really critical of. So she's having to deal with like the difference between her beliefs, her desire for Daniel, which she's never kind of shaken, and learning to swim in these kind of like really emotional, challenging waters with her friends. And this sounds like a book I'm going to really read the shit out of.
Yeah, talk about a book that really meets our moment, right? So if you are interested in reading The High Dive, it is available in print, ebook, and in audio. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Chelsea Fagan for sponsoring this week's episode.
I don't read a ton in audio, and I'm very perplexed by how people afford to read an audio, because it does seem wildly expensive for the reader. And I know that the numbers don't bear out on the back end for authors or narrators. So
no, I mean, you have to be selling so much volume to really notice the audio. I mean, it's different for me because obviously as an author, because I'm traditionally published, I over-index in audio because especially with Thank You for Listening in a book about audio, like I think 60% of my sales are audio. But it just there were so many problems and there were so many things to try to fix, and it was a little bit ridiculous to try to do all of them at the same time. But now that we're a year and a half in and everything's kind of working, I suddenly don't regret trying to do this anyway.
No. I mean, I think one of the fascinating things, and this is a piece of audio history, is in the early days, like my first books with my Scholastic book never had an audiobook. I think it does now. And then, but my early romances, HarperCollins didn't have an audio team. They were sold to specific audio companies, which then held the rights for a number of years. And now the sort of they have to be renegotiated.
Yes,
right?
publishing
Back
is
into the house.
the big five are like kind of buying them back once those options are expiring from
or trying, right?
Yeah, or trying. And now, I mean, also that was the other thing is that, again, this is just the kind of overreach, that creep that always happens in industries where, 10 years ago, you could negotiate out your audio rights. Sometimes a publisher didn't even want them. Now you will never get them to give up audio. And so, but again, I think that's changing also from some kind of upward pressure from indie authors who now are moving over into trad and are able to, dictate their own terms and say, like, I'm keeping audio. So, publishers, they're going to adjust. They're going to figure this out. But my main thing is just trying to create an alternative to the way that it's working now, because I had zero, and as we've said, I'm a writer. I'd really like to just be writing my books. But there was no point in throwing over my life and my husband's life and, doing a home equity line of credit on our house just to create another audio production company or do something that had already been done. Like, I have no interest in doing that. I need to try to fix it, and if I can't, then I will know it's unfixable and I'll be fine.
But it seems like it is able to be fixed. So, but you have so many big projects now. You have authors who have really come to the table with Audiobrary,
yes,
and their backlist, like Sierra Simone at the end of July.
Yeah, so Sierra Simone, which is another author who I might have found through Fated Mates, actually, the way that you all talked about her. But I know how I found these books, which is another story. It's C.D. Reese she's at fault. But I went to Sierra when I was coming out with Casanova, and I just had some like indie author questions for her. And then I kind of mentioned in passing, if you have anything, you always do really well with your audio. You make really good decisions. They're really well done. But if you ever have anything where you want to do something with Audiobrary, I would love to partner with you in something. And she had come back saying, well, the new Camelot trilogy, those options are coming up, and I really have wanted to do something as a duet. And I was like, oh my God, these books are so perfect for it because it's so intimate. It's the three, it's like throuple. It's so intimate. And like, those books are just, they're crazy.
I mean, they'd be perfect, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And in fact, I just sent a sample to one of the narrators, to Teddy Hamilton, and he sent me a message being like, oh my God, that sample. He was like, it sounds so present. And it's like an advertisement for doing something live, for doing this kind of thing live. Like, you can just tell it's three actors working off of each other, and it's great. So anyway, yeah, I put together all three books, and we actually shot, quote unquote, we recorded, because the only way my Hollywood brain can work is that I organized the recording. I broke the books apart, kind of like batch shooting it, like the way they did Lord of the Rings, where I just created all of the scenes between, Ash and Embry, all the scenes between Greer and Embry, the three of us, and structured it so that we recorded in order of the character and relationship arcs. So that, like, the boys, their entire arc was recorded over 3 days before I ever came into the picture, so that we got as much, like, we could just stay in the mindset of where we were over the course of those three books. So it recorded over like 3.5 weeks. We had a director, we had an engineer.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Incredible.
we really did it as I wanted to treat those books, because I think Sierra is a beautiful, beautiful writer, and sometimes the explicit nature of her writing overshadows the fact that these characters in this story is incredible. And I wanted to treat it like Chekhov. That was my thing. I was like, we're going to meet the texts where they are. That's what we're going to do. We're going to treat this seriously and see how good we can make it.
That's really incredible. I mean, and that, I think, for me, I think is kind of why I prefer full cat, like, kind of all or nothing, right?
Yes,
because it does feel in some way like, I don't know, it feels like maybe I can't tell. Maybe I just think I can tell, right? That, when people are in the room together, there seems to be like a magic that comes through, that people are acting with each other, not just like reading lines that get, cut together later or whatever.
And I think like this is why there's so much behind the scenes stuff that happens in this. And this is another reason where for Audiobrary, like my selection process of the books that we acquire have been, I want a great story, but I also want, if there's a story behind the story, that's really what I want, because it gives me an opportunity to put on that English major, former writing tutor hat and like get into the weeds on the writing process with the authors, the recording process. So, for instance, with New Camelot, pre-orders are up everywhere. But then again, with Audiobrary, like we have a discount going on the bundle for all 3 books, plus the bonus features, which at the end of each book, there's going to be interviews with Sierra, the cast, bloopers, an extra bonus epilogue that Sierra wrote for us. So, it's like I just kind of get to be queen of my domain.
Yeah, that's so fun.
Yeah.
So we'll put links to all of that in show notes, everyone, so you can go and pre-order and check out Audiobrary too.
Oh, thank you.
But so let's get into, can we go back to thank you for listening though, which is actually, no, you did my Oxford year too. So
yes,
can we talk about one of the questions that was on the Discord, and it's something I wanted to talk about too, is how does it feel to do your own book? Let me tell you something, Julia Whelan. I've never read one of my books.
Yeah,
So
understandable.
How do you do that?
Why would you do that?
Why would you do that?
Terrible idea.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's funny. Someone asked me to comment on, I guess, like Melania Trump is using an AI voice for her audiobook or something, and someone wanted me to comment. And I was like, first of all, I don't want to wade into anything having to do with that name and like get my name mixed into that. But I was also just thinking about that. I'm like, well, it's because she hasn't read her own book. Okay, so very different experiences for all 3 books. With my Oxford year, it was terrible. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible recording experience because, first of all, just on its face, it's a very difficult book. If it had just been sent to me, it would have been hard to record. It was first person present, so like emotions are very on the surface, and you have to be like just very immersed in the character's head. Plus, she's the only American in a cast of like 13 Brits. And so doing I had done some accent coaching beforehand just to make sure that I could differentiate enough to keep that many characters spinning. Plus, add into that debut imposter syndrome. Like, just reading my own book, being like, why did I write it like this? This is stupid. Like, wanting to edit everything. So that was since that was the first time I'd had to do it, it was brutal, and I have not listened to it. The second time around with Thank You for Listening, what I kind of learned from the bad experience of my Oxford year was to read every draft out loud. So it's not that by the time I started recording, it's not like I'd made certain performance decisions. Like a lot of those choices were made kind of embarrassingly late in the process, but at least I felt comfortable with the text. Like it felt very much in my voice, very easy to translate, and it was just a blast to do. With Casanova, the interesting thing was that doing it duet, where suddenly I had other people in the sandbox with me. And, these were men that I'm very good friends with. I wanted to bring into this because they knew how important it was to me. And so that was really fun because that was like working with other actors again and finally just letting someone else read my stuff. And really fulfilling, like remarkably fulfilling, where I always thought I'd be like, no one else gets to touch my shit. And instead, like it was great, and I want to do it again.
Well, I would imagine it's a great feeling to have another person at the top of their game engaging with your writing that way. It has to be thrilling. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it was very cool.
What is the ideal way in which you take to prepare a book like Storms, for example, that has, right? You're the single narrator. There's lots of characters. What does that process look like for you?
Okay, wait, but before you answer that question, can I just say, so I have not heard the audiobook of Storms yet, although everyone will get to hear the first chapter of Storms after this episode. But I have seen, Julia sent me, having Julia be your narrator is the greatest because she sends you little like audio clips.
A little clip.
And it's so
Okay, what was the one
unreal.
she sent that we all listened to?
Oh, and she sent me one where she is like 6 people in a scene. Because this book, I apologize, has a lot of scenes where lots of people
I've had
are
worse.
talking.
I've had worse.
And it's unreal to watch you. And also, you sent me a video. So, like, I could see you really just like seamlessly doing this work. And I know that you're a professional, but it is an unreal, like, absolute joy to watch somebody at the top of their game do
Thank
something
you.
like this. And I also have to say, like, all my other books, I can't listen to them because I'm like, it never quite feels the way that I think it should feel. But like this scene, it was just wild to me hearing you. And I knew it. This is why you were on my vision board. But please go on and talk about how you prepare for a book with a million characters.
Okay,
or
so
one
let's start with
2.
this. This is good. So your book is actually a perfect example of this. Okay, so I never have a chance to read the book ahead of time before I agree to do one because the producers don't have time to wait for me to read it. I don't have time to read something I'm not going to record. So I have to just go on like synopsis, author, vibes, whatever. Obviously with you, I was like, no brainer. I want to do this. So because I would never be asked in any world to do your historical romance. And so I just always, you were like, I just never thought I'd get to do one of your books. So the fact that this happened, I was so excited about. And I just said, absolutely, of course, yes, I'm in. And at that point, once I get the manuscript, I read it and I create 2 lists. One is a word list of anything I don't know how to pronounce. So some of it will be author invention, like the piece of technology that he invented, the kind of tablet. I was like, how do you want me to say that? Some of it is technical, like geographical locations, where I just need to make sure.
All those Rhode Island names.
All those Rhode Island names, and you can't take it for granted. You can't just assume you know how to say it. There was an Algonquin word that ended up no one knew how to pronounce, and we went down that rabbit hole and talked to everyone we could,
anymore.
and it's not which I've had a lot of experience with over the years of, and it's gotten so much better. Like that's a side note, but just how much more research has been done in resurrecting some of those dead languages now. There's so much more to do, which again, to your point about the quality of audiobooks earlier on, like we didn't know what we didn't know.
And a producer in that scenario, the producer really like was doing a bunch of side work too, looking for it.
Yeah. So because, and again, your producer, who is Linda Korn, who is fantastic. She's at PRH and she started as an audiobook director there. And so we've known each other for my whole career. And she's just one of my favorite people. So I'm able to have a very good conversation with Linda where I just go, this is my list. What can you do about this? But I always do my own research anyway and try to find out, where we're at. With the characters, what I'm keeping a list of any speaking character, and I'm looking for obviously any vocal traits that the author gives them, whether that's an accent or a timbre or, some signature, some vocal signature. I'm also looking at any biographical information that I think is important. And then once I've got that worked out, the whole roster, I kind of then hone in on who are my main characters that are constantly in conversation with each other. If it's the same 4 or 5 people, and in this case, perfect example of like a family trapped on an island together, this is the cast. This is the main cast. So then I start creating voices that are distinct enough between those 6 characters or so that the listener will always know who's talking at any given moment. So there's kind of a repertory theater company in my head of like, I'm going to pull in this person to play this character. And I just start building out the world based on what the author has given me and then what I know needs to happen in the translation process for the listener.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Alexandra Harvey, author of A Deal with the Devil. I want it.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
Done. Sold.
Exactly. Okay, so Kitty is our heroine, and her reckless father, who's just like this gambler, he's constantly like, making bad decisions, has agreed to sell her sister into marriage to a cruel nobleman who is rumored to have murdered his 3 dead wives. And so Kitty is like, I need to save my sister, not just from marriage, but from save her life. And so what she does is she essentially blackmails the most dangerous man in London. And Earl, everyone calls the Devil of Mayfair. Fine. He has built an empire collecting secrets, inheritances, and broken reputations. And no one crosses him, Sarah, until Kitty.
Of course they don't. Because he's the Devil of Mayfair, Jen.
She is just a bookseller with a sharp tongue. She has a literary side hustle and a serious talent for stirring up trouble. How is this woman have the moxie to cross him? Well, she wants to stop a murderer, and she's pretty sure that he's the only one who can help. And so if you would like to see this blackmail turned into an alliance also result in an HEA, then A Deal with the Devil is the book for you.
I would like to see that. And if you also would like to see it, then you can read this book right now in print, ebook, or with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Alexander Harvey, as always, for sponsoring this week's episode.
When you're recording, like for PRH, you're still recording in your studio, though. So is that something where you just then are sending files, or are you getting on with Linda?
Yeah, so in this situation, I just record on my own. Sometimes I have a director. It depends on the project. Sometimes I'll ask for a director. Usually that's in actually nonfiction, where there's such a word list or there's pronunciations or something where it's very nice to have someone there just listening along, being like, nope, you did not nail that Dutch word or whatever. But when I'm doing fiction, I really like to not have a director, because I like to be able to stop and go back and tweak things exactly the way I want and make sure that the character voices are, I just don't want to be wasting someone else's time, if that makes sense.
No, that totally does.
So, yeah.
And do you have, one of the questions that was on the Discord is this, what does it actually look like? Are you working from an ebook, or, is it highlighted?
Yes.
What's the visual of the script?
So oh my God, seriously. Okay. So back in the Jurassic period when I started,
the Discord is going to want screenshots, I know.
we can do this. We used to have, they would send me the printed out manuscript.
Sure.
And I would take a physical highlighter and highlight the characters in different colors.
Like a script.
And then I realized that was insane, because books are 400 pages long, and you're not just playing your character, you're playing every character. And the translation process that would have to happen in my head of who was the blue highlighter again? Who was the green highlighter? Terrible, slowed me down. I don't do it. So now all I do, and this is again, just familiarizing yourself with the process, but I only highlight intention. So if there's a whispered or yelled or something, I will just, so that my eye can catch it before I get to the dialogue.
And do you still work on paper?
No. So now it's a PDF, and I have it on an iPad right behind my mic in front of me, and I'm reading off of an iPad. With paper, you used to have to pause for page turns.
Oh, sure, of course.
I mean, it was a whole other.
Okay, wait. I have a question though. So you're not scrolling. Do you have it set up to essentially scroll automatically?
I am scrolling.
You scroll.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll hear my wrist crack. It's the only exercise I get. Very, very strong wrists.
And so just to give people a sense of timing, this is why Audiobrary is so important, and the work that you've done to advocate for other narrators and yourself is so important. How long does it take
to record?
To do a full book? Yeah, my book.
Right. So for me, I cap myself at 2 finished hours per day, because I feel like my voice and my brain just kind of fall off after that. But that's about 4 hours in the booth. And none of that has to do with the actual prep time. So audiobooks are paid and budgeted for on a per finished hour basis. So a 12-hour book, which I think is about what Storms was coming in at, 10 to 12, is about 40 hours of work for me, right? All told. So I did this, and again, with Audiobrary and running a company and everything, I've even cut that 2 hours back. So I think I did this over about a week and a half. And sometimes they're better. Like weekends, as much as I love them and they feel sacred to me, they're also really good recording time because it's quiet in my neighborhood. And so I sometimes have to take advantage of a Saturday and do like a really long record.
I just think it's a massive amount of work. It feels overwhelming and just incredible when you're
you hear
finished.
the result,
It's
right?
remarkable.
And I think to your point about the video part of it, which is like, I don't know, I'm just in here doing my job and I don't think about that a lot. But every time I post a video of me recording like in the booth, like people, they want like video books. Like they want to watch.
They just want to watch you do it.
Yeah, I'll do it live. Like I'll do it live at a library or an event or something. And I mean, it's just old-fashioned storytelling.
Yeah.
It's a one-woman show sort of situation, and the response is always it's very interesting.
No, it's very cool because when I sent the video of you doing 6 voices all in one scene to my sister, she replied and she was amazed, and then she said, I guess in my head I just thought she did all of them separately and then pieced them together.
Most people do.
Like, that's wild.
That's a question I get. I get that question a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah. Because I think, and sometimes there have been a couple of books where I have done it, not character voices, not lines of character dialogue, but when I'm doing a dual novel with myself, so that there's alternate chapters from characters' points of view and the voice is a little different depending on which character is the narrative voice. I have in the past then recorded the book straight through with like just one character's chapters and then gone back and done the other character's chapters just to stay in the voice.
Do you think that writing has changed in response to the rise of audio? So I had somebody once say, like, do you think people are using dialogue tags more or less, or write things like that? And I don't know the answer. Sometimes I feel like I read a book and I think this person was thinking about audio, not about like someone reading with their eyes.
That is a really good point. I think that certain authors who love audio, I definitely know they have told me just anecdotally that it has changed the way that they write. Yes, getting rid of dialogue tag. There's also, like in, for instance, the new Camelot series and anything I have control over. Like if it's an Audiobrary project, I'm cutting those dialogue tags like all over the place because they slow down rhythm. They, unless they're there for rhythm. Like sometimes that's knowing. Like you just have to know that he said in the middle of the sentence is there to let the listener download what has just been said before going on to the next thing, right? It's like a bridge. But I do think that certain authors have definitely brought that kind of audio awareness to their writing. I talk with Emily Henry about this actually, where she has said publicly, I'm not like outing the conversations we have on our little walks that we take occasionally. She has said that she's seen comments and reviews where people will be like, I started Beach Read, but like I didn't think it was funny. And then I heard the audiobook and I understood how it was funny and now I love it. And Emily's point is that sometimes humor is just really hard to nail on a page, especially for a generation that maybe has grown up with like texting and doesn't have that ability to like read tone. So much has changed in the last 15 years, let's say, societally as well as in publishing and audio, that like I can't pull apart what is really the driver of this, but something is different for sure.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it feels like if you're a writer who has a really strong kind of authorial voice, then audio can really, like the narrative voice in your book can be really boosted by audio. And I feel that way about, my historicals are narrated by Mary Jane Wells now, who I didn't get until my most recent series.
Interesting, because she's amazing.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Yeah.
And now I feel like my historicals, the audiobooks on my historicals are so much more powerful, I think, because she gets the narrative voice in an interesting way.
Yeah, I mean, this is why when an author finds a narrator, like that collaboration becomes, to me, so important. And again, another reason why it should be honored, economically speaking, Because there are authors who, and now it's changed, right? But at the beginning of, for instance, Taylor Jenkins Reid's career, okay, I did her first books. Like, she didn't have audio for the first couple of books, and then they were sold to Dreamscape, and then they hired me to do a couple of them. And
this was in the past, before she was Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Mm-hmm. But we became friends because I knew she was in LA. I called her up and I was like, you are punching so far above your weight. Like, these books are so good. And I'm telling you this from like a fellow writer, not even as your narrator. Just, I love what you do. And that created this kind of bond between us where I will get messages from her as she's writing saying like, I don't know what you're going to do with this character, but I got to keep her in there. And like, we'll talk about it later. Like, she'll give me heads up of like, this character makes no sense, but I'm doing it because I trust you to figure it out. And we, having that kind of long-standing relationship with someone and understanding their work on that level, and that's the gift of this, and that's what keeps me doing it. And at a moment in her career where people were finding her books because I was narrating them, which now seems ridiculous because who doesn't know her books? And they'll find me because I'm narrating her books. But at the time, and same with Emily, that was a shift in the industry. Your narrator will get you a lot of mileage depending on who the narrator is, but more importantly, when they understand your voice and what you're trying to say, and they get the tone that you're going for. That is the truest adaptation process an author will ever get. Hollywood will never give you that. The audiobook is the first and truest adaptation you will ever have, and that's why the narrator is important.
I'm an anxious listener if I don't know what's about to happen, so I almost always reread an audio. And I was telling Sarah this week, I was lucky enough to get an advanced audio copy of the new S.A. Cosby book, which will be out by the time everyone listens to this. I really like the narrator a lot. He's got a terrific voice. And about a quarter of the way through the book, I was like, I need to switch to an arc that I can read with my eyes because I cannot... Like, I'm too nervous.
It's too much.
Anxious. It's too much. I
need control.
This, right?
I need control.
I just need to know what's going to happen.
And I
in the freezer. Right? Exactly. But it's really funny because someone was like, well, you could speed it up. And I was like, oh, I like to listen at like a slow speed because I like to listen
at a normal pace.
Yeah, I like to listen at talking speed, right?
Yeah.
And I think partly, though, that's because I think I've heard really interesting, compelling sort of reasons people like to listen faster. Like, it's not judgment. But I'm like, yeah, I like to listen at 1.0. And sometimes if I'm feeling really sassy, 1.1. I don't know.
Slow down there, Speed Racer.
Exactly, right?
I will weigh in on that because I used to be the person that was like, no, listen to it at the speed I read it to you. There were very specific performance choices made.
Yeah.
And then someone made the point very compellingly that it's, especially for someone with neurodivergent, like the ADHD brain needs to go at a certain pace or we lose them. And I'm like, okay, then fine. Then set it to the speed of your brain. I relinquish this argument. I give it up. However, the people who are listening at 3 times speed just to like get through it, I'm like, how is this fun? How is this? Would you watch a Netflix show at 3 times speed? Like, I'm so confused by this, but they just want to like mark off their TBR and like get their Goodreads count up or something.
I guess my question for this, and this comes from the Discord too, but it's the reverse of Jen's question about like, do writers write differently for audio? But do you feel like the compulsion of a lot of readers to read, to listen faster, does it impact the way you think about the work?
Yes. Oh my God, yes. So this is, again, another thing that I think has changed a lot in audio over 15 years since I started. I remember, I have an explicit memory of being in the studio on Gone Girl and having the director keep saying, you got to slow down. Like, Kirby had already recorded his sections and she's like, you got to slow down or it's going to sound so out of pace with what Kirby did. And I was like, yes, but I want to do this at the speed of Amy Elliott Dunn's brain.
She's stressed.
Right. She's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Like, she's 10 steps ahead of Nick. That's the entire point of the book. Like, if I have to slow down, first of all, it just doesn't feel right. And coming from, an on camera and a character background, I was like, I just couldn't understand why this was important. And I think now, all these years later, with the speed at which people listen to things, TikTok, and everything is just, people talk faster. And I think that was the gap, is that the listeners started just, the speed of conversation has increased over the last generation for sure. And so the old way of narrating audiobooks does not really work. And now, look, there's also a technical issue of like, I can't read that fast when I am just reading text without making mistakes, and we're not allowed to make mistakes. But I find that we did this with Casanova. We're doing it again with New Camelot. My husband, who is an incredible acting coach and voice and speech guy and comes out of New York theater and like that kind of brain, he does all of the directing and editing on these projects. And he will go in, like with New Camelot, he just kept coming after us when we were recording, being like, faster, faster, faster. Like, keep it at the speed of conversation. And then he goes in afterward and gives space where you need it to be able to, for the listener, again, it's usually not in the sentence, it's usually between the sentences. And that allows this really like intimate, you feel like you're in the room kind of feel when you're listening to this stuff, because it feels like it's real people talking. Yeah. So it has changed very much my approach to things. And but whenever I hear a clip back of myself, like if someone makes a reel or something and they like attach a bit of an audio that I've done to it and it's at 1.5 or 2, I just like mute it so fast because I'm like, I don't sound like that. And I had a moment, my best friend had to I had a breakdown for a minute at some point a couple years ago where I was like, what if the only reason that I'm popular is because I sound okay at 2 times speed? Like I don't sound like Minnie Mouse. What if that's the only reason I'm successful? And she was like, you need to go touch grass. Shut up.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Avon Books, publishers of Alexander Page's An Irish Summer.
Boston is the perfect place for Chelsea. She has her best friend, her family, a great job, and ever since graduating from college, she has been living and working at the same bed and breakfast, and she loves it. She loves that feeling of stability until she is informed that O'Shea's bed and breakfast is going to be sold, and she has less than a month to find a new job and an apartment, which seems like a problem in Boston, frankly.
Very expensive there.
So she takes a summer gig at the B&B Sister Hotel in Galway, Ireland, convincing herself it will be an adventure. But when she gets there, in fact, it's everything she hates. It's nonstop rain. There's no iced coffee. She has to share a bathroom.
This is unacceptable.
Unfair labor practices, clearly. So working at this place might, kind of pad her resume, but it's not going to really solve her problem. So her coworkers, however, are determined to change her mind, especially charming, handsome Colin. So these two strike up a deal. He's going to show Chelsea everything Ireland has to offer, and only then will she be able to pass judgment. And as she finds herself warming up to the charming Irish lifestyle and her charismatic new friend, she can't help but wonder what's going to happen when summer comes to an end.
Oh boy, everyone loves an Irishman. It's Hosier summer here in our house.
Name your hot Irishman.
Exactly. Cillian Murphy. I could go on, everyone. But anyway, if you love a hot Irishman, this book is definitely for you. You can find it right now in print, ebook, or audiobook. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Avon Books and Alexander Page for sponsoring this week's episode.
I'm fascinated, though. I mean, I know that you can listen to the podcast at 2-point speed. And again, I think like you, when people were like, as someone who has I have a neurodiversity and I need to listen at the speed of my brain. I was like, oh, that totally makes sense. Like I just I didn't quite get it up until that moment, but I am sort of fascinated by, I feel like I already talk pretty fast. And
there is a difference. I mean, look, I will put a lot of TikTok videos or even podcasts. Yeah, I'll bump it up because there's a difference between extemporaneous speech and people doubling back on what they're saying and starting sentences over. And I've done that about 100 times so far in this conversation alone. But when it is written out in front of me and I am reading text that actually exists and is scripted for me, I am doing it at the pace I think it should be done at.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a mistake.
So I have a question, which is there anything, what is the most challenging part of the work? I mean, obviously you narrate both romance and other types of books.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, it feels like the sex is probably a more challenging piece because whatever. But is there something that you...
Well, how about S.A. Cosby making me on... Somebody's going to die, Sarah.
Yeah, what about, like, that's what I mean. Like, what is the most challenging piece of the text? Or is it just different per... Is there something you love or don't love? Or
Honestly, the thing I don't...
question.
This is like the text I get from Taylor. You'll fix it.
We'll fix it in post.
Here's, look, the thing I don't like about the job, and again, this goes back to the compensation issue, not to harp on this, but it's the kind of root of all of this, is the volume issue. I became such a better narrator when I wasn't having to do 70 books a year to keep my head above water.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's because that focus is so stripped. I'm just like prepping things very quickly. I'm getting in the booth being like, wait, especially with romance. And when I had a good, solid career under the Sophie Eastlake name, and I was working with these indie authors who are machines and are like the most reliable, responsible. I mean, they're the inspiration for June French, and they would book me like a year out, and they'd be like, I'm going to have this, my spring book, my summer book, my fall book, my Christmas novella. Like, they would know exactly when I was.
They know, yeah.
And I would sometimes sit down with those books and be like, wait, which bodyguard is this? Like,
yeah.
No idea what I'm sitting down to. So volume is really was the worst part of the job, which is, of course, when you're starting out, what you want. You want as many books as possible, and then it becomes a curse. But in terms of actual performance and doing the job, emotional scenes are difficult because we did a project for Audiobooks called Animal Bodies, which is an essay collection, and it's about death, desire, and what is it? How does it go? It's so good. Death, desire, and other complications, or something like that. And there are some stories in there that would just like bring me to my knees. And as actually one of the bonus material pieces, I wrote a little mini essay with the author's permission, obviously, about I just broke down while recording one of these stories. And I recorded straight through. Normally, if it had been any other publisher, I would have stopped, gotten my shit together, gotten back in, and started over. But I was like, no, this is what we're trying to do at Audiobooks. We're trying to be human, and like, it's just going to be whatever it is. And so I recorded the whole thing, and then I gave it to Jeff, to my husband, and he was like, the problem is that you've centered you and not the listener. And that was such a worthy... So we made a bonus feature out of it where I was like, this is why I went back and re-recorded this story, because it was self-indulgent for me to have the catharsis and the breakdown that you're meant to have, you, the listener. But I'm going to play for you a minute of what that really raw recording felt like. And so that's why emotional scenes are difficult. Kristen Hanna, I have to record like a page and a half of her at a time, and then I have to get up and walk around for an hour and come back in. It's an incredibly long recording process, her books. Because again, trying to find that balance between I want it to feel authentic, I never want it to feel like I am putting something on for the listener, but I want the listener to be able to have like enough neutrality that I'm not pushing them into something. Mm-hmm. So no, the sex scenes are not difficult. The sex scenes are just like the climactic scenes of any book. Like it's like a battle scene or like a chase scene, or, you know, pick your genre.
For me to write.
They're difficult for you to write. Well, yeah, and me too. I'm not going to be writing Casanova again. I was like, okay, I'm done with that. Thank you. That was fun.
Well, speaking of writing, you have so many things going on. Are you working on? No. Why not? We want it.
I know. Well, then someone needs to come run Audiobooks for me. I am currently in the process of figuring out what the next thing is going to be, and my goal is that by the new year, that's going to just start getting worked into the daily schedule. I have to do it because I'm starting to, it's a mental health thing for me more than anything else. And yeah, so like things are just coming out now, almost like, some like secretion where I sit down to work on an email, and then I'm like, my Word doc is sitting right there, and I'll just be like, and get 1,000 words out on something. So, but no, not in any serious capacity.
And, but you do have a movie coming.
Yeah, which again would have been great timing wise. I've been waiting for that movie for 13 years to happen, and it would have been great if I could have had a book ready to sell when that thing came out. But
sometimes that's not the way it goes.
But no, just selling other people's books. So my Oxford year is getting the Netflix treatment coming out on August 1st.
Oh, that's so exciting!
So
Soon.
exciting.
Okay.
Have you seen?
I haven't.
When do you?
I know.
It feels like it's time.
It does feel like it's time. So because of the way that this book came about, I talk about this in the author's note, which is weirdly not in the audio. I acknowledge that. I forgot to record it in the audio. We weren't really recording audio, like author's notes at that time back in 2018. And so it just didn't occur to anybody to do it. But I talk about this in the author's note. I was hired to work on a screenplay. This started as an existing screenplay set up at Sony. And I was hired along with a friend of mine to come in as like the Oxford specialists, because I had spent a year there, to punch up the screenplay. And then that turned into a kind of page one rewrite of, we were the first women who had been working on the screenplay. It had started as kind of a drama and then become a rom-com. And so like tonally, it was just kind of Frankensteined. And so we spent over a year and like 25 drafts, like doing a version of this screenplay. So the producers got to know my opinions about the story and what I wanted to change and what they wouldn't let me change. And then they came up with the idea, like, do you think this would make a good book? And I was like, oh my God, please, let's do this as a book. So that's how it happened. And there was a cast attached back then. So I was writing very quickly, trying to get this book out to beat the movie that ended up not happening. And, just typical Hollywood process. But so as a result, I don't own the book. Like, they own the book. So I've had nothing to do with the production. This is all their hard work. I've had nothing to do with it. So I have not been involved in it, I think, in the way that like a normal author would be involved. But I'm, it's all copacetic and it's all fine. But as a result, I'm not like banging down their door being like, I need to see a cut.
Yeah. Right.
I'm like, just show it to me when it's actually ready to go. I'd love to see it. I'm excited to see it. But I think the typical like Hollywood excitement that a lot of people feel, I just don't have. Like, I'm over it.
Well, and as you said, I love what you said about the first and purest adaptation is the audiobook, and you've done your own audiobooks. So
yeah,
and you've had the Hollywood treatment, but
right,
better.
Exactly. And I think like that's part of it is I'm very excited to see their version, because that's what's actually really unique about this story is someone had made a comment because Sophia Carson, who's lovely and who's playing my character Ella, but they renamed Anna for the project. And there was an article in Elle about the project, and she was saying that they changed the character to match her identity more. And someone had kind of DM'd me and was like, "Does this bother you?" And I was like, you don't understand how little this, this makes me so happy, because in the grand tradition of this project, the way it started, like every writer has had a different version of this character. Mm-hmm. I have worked on many different versions of this character, and the book version is mine. She is named for my great-great-grandmother. She is a lot of my identity put into her. I love that the lead actress is getting a stab at that too. It just feels right for this project, So it's a just unique collaboration sort of situation.
Julia, before we move on, there's a topic I want to come back to for a minute, which is you mentioned that you had worked under a pseudonym before, but the question of pseudonyms and audiobook narrators, I know is something that can be a bit of a hot button topic on social media. Can you just take a minute maybe to talk a little bit about this issue, in particular in the audiobook industry, and kind of how it plays out?
We're all we can like understand why authors use pseudonyms and pen names, but for some reason with narrators, people are just very casual about outing them. And I've seen videos recently where someone will be like, I just found out that this one narrator also records under that this is their real name and they record under this name. And I get why you're doing it. It's actually very flattering because it's like, I found this new treasure trove of new audiobooks by the same person. But just do your due diligence, please, as a human being, and check and see if this person is out about the fact that they record under multiple names, because some of them are very, very clear about that, but some of them aren't. And it's usually for very, very good personal reasons. And by dint of explanation here, I can only share my personal reason, which is back when I started the Sophie Eastlake pseudonym, I was still doing on-camera acting, and I had made a kind of red line in my career that I wouldn't do nudity, and it was costing me my career. Like, it was actively, I was losing out on every big project at that time. I would be like second choice, and then they would say, but you'll do the nudity, right? And I would say no, and my agent had quit. And like, I was dying on that hill, and I didn't want someone to then see that I was like recording romance and saying, oh, so you'll do it, in audio, but you won't do it on camera. And I didn't want to have that conversation. I also had, as a former child actor, some very creepy fans, like stalkery situations. And I didn't want those men to be able to hear me read this naughty stuff to them. And so I had a good reason. At this point in my life, I don't care. I'm old and I'm over it. And I think I've outlived most of those guys. And they're not interested in me anymore. So I don't care. But some narrators are, for whatever personal reasons, they're in a custody dispute, or they live in a conservative town, and they don't want their kids to be subjected to any bullying that might happen should someone find out. Like, it's just not your information to share. And I just ask people to be a little bit more conscientious about that whenever possible. When some of us started in this industry, it just didn't have the fandom that it has now. And I don't think anyone thought then that someone would be comparing our voice to another audiobook we did. They seemed like romance wasn't what it was. And now it's massive. And I think a lot of people, if they could go back in time, would probably not record things under two names, just pick a fake name from the beginning to start with. For privacy reasons, but that's not the world we live in right now. So just a little bit of grace, and I will get off my soapbox now.
Before we go, I was wondering if we haven't really talked about like recommendations or referrals at all. I'm obviously Sierra's book, I think our listeners will be very interested in checking out. Maybe, I don't know, like, do you listen to audiobooks yourself? Do you have people that you think are
not
like great narrators that people might check out? What?
Of course.
Can we make some
are there
recommendations
some or are there narrators who you wish got more attention?
Yeah. It's a very good question. I don't listen to audiobooks all that much, as you can imagine. But I will say that there are the book that I listened to, that I suddenly understood why people love audiobooks, was Eduardo Ballerini's performance of Jess Walter's Beautiful Ruins.
Oh, what a book. I've never listened to it.
Oh my God. And he's so good in it that's why I wrote the Jacopo character in Casanova LLC for him to do. Because there's a scene in Beautiful Ruins where he's playing like 5 different old Italian men fighting with each other. And it's just, oh my God, it's so good.
I gotta get that.
So that was the book where, and I love Jess too as a writer. And so I just was like, oh, this is why everyone loves audiobooks. Bonnie Turpin is one of those narrators to me. Mary Jane Wells is honestly one of those narrators to me. And we just, on Memorial Day weekend, she had written a one-woman show and turned it into an audio called Heroine. And it won the Audie a few years ago for Best Original Work. And she's an amazing writer and performer. And I love her work. So that's now on Audioberry too. Dion Graham, Simon Vance. It's an industry dense with talent. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I love I love that.
Are these do you find that now, obviously at the beginning there were a lot of actors who were coming to audio. Do you feel like now there are people who are specifically audio people?
I think so. I mean, people ask me, how do we get into it? And I'm always like, I don't know, man, because back when I got into it, we all just fell backwards into this profession. I don't know what it's like nowadays to have to go and try to build a career in it. I really don't. I'm not the person to ask about that. But I do know that there are people who now very intentionally come into this and say, I mean, I've been asked to like teach classes at a college level for this, like this is now, which given advances with AI and, I think it's a very hard road now to distinguish yourself enough in the oncoming zombie apocalypse that you will survive it. Like getting started now, I feel is
This is how I feel about writing.
Yeah.
It just feels like.
Right. Are we actually going to tell people like, yes, definitely bet the farm on this industry? I don't know. Like, but I also think another good audiobook, if someone hasn't listened and is interested, I think the audiobook of Daisy Jones and the Six
is so good. Right?
It's very perfect gateway because it's written as an oral history, so it sounds like a podcast. So I always recommend that one for people who are just getting started because it's like it's the closest thing they're already used to listening to. And I think there's probably a lot. I mean, I've heard Leather and Lark, I've heard Lights Out, I've heard, especially in the romance space. I think New Camelot, frankly, is going to be that coming up. I really do. I'm feeling really good about how it's coming together. We actually have, if anyone wants, we have a explicit, seriously.
Well, it's Sierra Simone, everyone. You know where you're. I
couldn't find a page that wasn't that, so that's what we have. It's in the Audiobrary app. You don't need an account or anything. You just like log in with an email, create a password of your choosing, and it's right there in the Discover section if people want to hear like a 2-minute spicy little steamy sample. Plus there's samples on the webpage, like for each book. But yeah, it's I'm putting a lot of energy right now, obviously, into trying to. I'm not stemming the tide with AI. Like that's going to happen and it's going to take over the industry. This was always going to happen. But I feel like while everyone else is kind of focused over there, I want to try to fix the human part of this to try to make it sustainable for the future. Because to your point, it's like authors getting into this now. Like, how are we protecting these people against this? And I want Audiobrary to be a place where people who are just still interested in human storytelling, to me, they're two totally different products. I'm not combative against it. It's just like, that's a different product. I'm not competing with it. It's a completely different thing. I'm worried about this. It's the human storytelling. That's what I'm in here for. And I want these people to be paid appropriately.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. Last night I was with some people and we were talking about AI, and that's sort of where I netted out after many glasses of wine, was this sort of sense of like, if we can't stop it, then we have to establish ourselves as a different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The analogy that I make around this is, when electricity happened, we didn't stop using candles. We stopped killing all the whales to use the fat to make the candles. But now candles are still this very elemental human thing. We give them as gifts. We still like to make them. They create atmosphere. We have a relationship to them. We watch them get smaller and smaller and smaller. It's a much more intimate sort of experience than just flipping on a light. But we still have a relationship to
framing it. Yeah.
See, I'm a middle school teacher, and I think nobody should be using AI. But
I don't think anyone should be using it.
I mean, I hate it. But
yeah, right.
No, but I mean, for me, it's like really different, right? Because, and like the analogy, and this is not my analogy, but I've seen it on social media, and it's like really perfect. Is like if you're trying to convince students not to use it, which is where I live, it's like, at the gym, you could bring a forklift and move the weights from one side of the room to the other. But the weights don't actually need to be moved. Right? Like the work is within you.
Yes.
Right. And so that, and I understand that, but like, I for sure am a person who's just like, I'm not interested in machine created art. I'm interested in human art.
Completely
right?
agree.
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean, it's not art. It's again, it's a different product. But I mean, yes, I think that, and again, we can have this conversation because we grew up knowing the difference. We have a comparison. It's a paradoxical experience for us. We can compare and contrast these two things. I worry about children who may not have that other side of it. And so for them, this is going to be normal and the everyday. And that's the part where I don't have kids, so that's your problem.
Thanks.
I'm out. I don't know how to talk to the children about this. I'm just saying that in my specific corner of audiobooks.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, and I think models like that, mental models for how to think about, it can be really important, and it's useful to hear the way other people are kind of thinking about those differences. So,
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, during this conversation, somebody was playing devil's advocate, or maybe not. Maybe he was just into AI, but he was like, what if it could be as good? And I was like, but I find it difficult to believe that it could ever be as ferocious as humans can be. Like, that it could ever have the fire, the understanding, the knowledge, the passion, the joy, the ferocity that somebody like Julia brings to. I'm
going to go ahead and see, in those conversations, I like to take the position of saying, okay, let's fully accept that it is going to be exactly the same and it is going to be just as good. Let's say that they can get there, because it wouldn't surprise me, to be fair. But if we know the difference, does it matter? And that's where the audio brewery part of this comes in, because it's like, people can go get our projects on Audible, and that's fine, and I don't want to gatekeep that. But when they know that if they come to Audio Brewery, it means so much more to the people, then it's like, what are you choosing? And so that's kind of my end game to that argument is, well, let's say you can't tell the difference, but if you know the difference, does that change your behavior? We've solved nothing.
A bummer.
Well, to be fair, it really wasn't our goal to solve it.
It wasn't our job. It wasn't our job.
But I'm glad we're all worried about it.
Yeah. No, and I mean, look, I
think if you love storytelling, of course you're worried about it, right?
You should be. And I think that, again, this is always what it comes down to so much is like, we can have the conversation about the art and how it's impacting the art, but it's also business. Like the fact that right now, because of the glut of everything, everything's got to change. Like the way the Kindle Unlimited payouts happen, where now you've got so many AI books in that system that real authors are just not getting any reads. Like it's becoming impossible to find anything. Mm-hmm. And again, it's
discoverability is,
and I mean, what are... Again, above my pay grade, but I'm just going to keep trying to do like a curated model on Audio Brewery, and we're going to see how it goes.
Julia Whelan, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today.
Wait, before we do this, I have to, because I don't think you're probably not going to do it justice, and no one will believe Jen, but your book is so good. And someone needs to be out there saying that to people because you're not going to do it yourself.
And she won't. She barely lets me talk about her books.
I know.
It's terrible.
And it is so good. I enjoyed it. Made me as excited to get in the booth as I feel with like Emily's books. That's how my drive was. I was like, I get to go back in on this one. It is just so much fun. It's so good. I sent you a message saying that I love that it is everything I love about your historical voice, that very sly, very knowing, great turn of phrase, like just incisive wit that you have in your historical voice brought to bear on a totally contemporary situation that just reveals your true strengths as a writer. And I love it so, so, so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You had to sit there and you had to take that.
I had to take it. But I will say, and I've said this before, I've said it, I will continue to say it forever, that like the one thing on my vision board for this book was Julia Whelan narrating it. And the day I heard from you.
Yeah. I thought I gave them enough time to get back to you. I wasn't trying to scoop.
I would rather hear all good news from you.
That's true. You should, you know what? You could have like a little call-in service. You're like, I'll
Exactly.
record your messages. I'll deliver people good news.
And the day I heard that, I immediately just texted the whole world. I was like, holy shit, it's happening.
Yeah.
And now like I said, I don't listen to my books, but I cannot wait to listen to this one. In fact, I sent an email to Linda this morning saying, hey, Linda,
Where are they?
I'll be able to see my book?
Well, I just sent them final QC
I've
pickups.
never sent that email ever. I don't ever want it.
That's great.
So this is amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for Storms. Thank you for what you're doing for writers and for narrators and for audiobooks and for all the work that you're putting in. I'm so happy to know you. I'm so proud to
thank
know
you. Thank you very much. Well, it's delaying the next book that I've actually written.
Can't wait. We will wait. We will wait.
Yeah,
But
gotta
also,
prioritize.
Everybody, we're going to put links in show notes to Audiobrary, to all the books that Julia recommended, to all the books that are there on the Audiobrary site. Pre-order the new Camelot series. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
So it was amazing having Julia here. A reminder, everybody, that if you hang on right now, you're going to get a sneak peek at the audiobook of These Summer Storms, which comes out next Tuesday and has the magnificent, ineffable, incredible Julia Whelan narrating. I'm so excited. And here we go.
Key.